Hey everyone, it's Alex, and you're listening to the Everyday Stories podcast, a podcast about the everyday stories from the people you know and people you don't know, here to help you learn a thing or two about life and the stories that define us. Today we're talking to Donatella, a 24-year-old Canadian currently living in Italy, where she is pursuing a law degree at the University of Bologna. So you pronounce it. Okay, cool. Originally from Brantford, Ontario, Donatella completed a BA in law at Carleton University in Ottawa, where she also studied French and Italian. Outside of academics, Donatella runs a Substack newsletter titled To Whom It May Concern, where they share reflections on studying and living abroad, cultural observations, and reflective essays. Donatella, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. Donatella and I literally met over Substack because I put a little Substack note, which in I guess Twitter world is like a tweet. And I said, if anyone is interested in being on a podcast, let me know. And Donatella is the first person I'm interviewing from the Substack community. So welcome. It's really exciting to do this.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I feel very honored, because
Okay.
it's such a cool platform and it's a really cool place to connect with people. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'm excited to get into that too. But firstly, I wanted to ask you, why did you decide to go to college studying law? And then also you were studying French and Italian too.
Yeah, so I was 18 when we decided to go to school, 17, 18, more or less. And I had wanted to be a lawyer since I was 10 years old. The obsession, I would say, started. My aunt was a paralegal growing up, and she used to take care of me after school sometimes, and Law and Order would be always on TV.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
just was fascinated really by the TV show. Some people might be concerned a 10-year-old would be watching Law and Order, but it's like a show I still love to this day. And so when I started getting to high school, the schools offered like law courses, philosophy, things of that nature. And I started to take those courses, but I also realized, I'm kind of good at this subject. And so when it came time to decide where to go to school, there's very few at the time Bachelor of Arts in law. There was a lot of like criminology. People who choose to go to law school usually take English, which I liked as well. But for me, I knew I wanted to study law, so I chose Carleton. And then because they offered so many different languages, which I also loved, I chose Carleton because they offered Italian, and that was like my mom and dad and like my family's from Italy. And it was important for me to kind of connect deeper with my culture and enjoy this other area of academics that maybe wasn't as encouraged, as opposed to something like when you say you study law, people think of it as quite prestigious. But I also really loved languages and wanted to foster that love.
Why do you love languages? And also too, are you fluent in Italian, or did you start studying Italian in college and you didn't know like a lick of Italian?
No, so it's hard. I struggle with the word fluency, I guess, because I would not say I'm fluent in Italian. You take different tests like A1 to C2 kind of thing. I haven't officially sat a test, so I struggle to say where my fluency stands. But both my parents' first language is technically Italian. Not really, though. It's dialect. So Italy is a country where you have a variety of different dialects being spoken throughout different regions, and some of them even change city by city in the same region. So it's incredibly linguistically diverse. So my mom's family's from Avellino, which is near Naples, and my dad was born in Torino, but the family's from Puglia, so an area called Foggia. So their dialects are completely different. So I say my grandparents speak Italian, but really they speak dialect. So that was my introduction to Italian. And so I didn't start studying standard Italian until high school, because I come from a city with quite a large Italian diaspora community, and it was lucky enough to be offered in my high school. And that's where I started to realize, oh, that word is not the same word my nonna use, my grandparents use. And I say I relearned Italian, I should say. But growing up, Italian was always on TV, music, hearing it being spoken to at home. But I didn't get serious about it probably until university.
Got it. I feel like that does huge leaps and bounds when you are consuming Italian media. Like even just listening to music or watching it on TV, even in the background as you're growing up, it's almost like your body can like intake that even without you even realizing it. I don't know if
It's
you've
so
ever
true.
felt that.
It's so true. Like, I may not, growing up, I may not have understood everything that was on the news, or I used to watch like a lot of cartoons in Italian, like kids' cartoons and stuff. But I realized as I got older, I know that word because that was a word that was taught in the cartoon, you know? So, it's subconscious almost.
Yeah.
And also, it definitely helps your pronunciation. Obviously, we know that the younger you start learning a language, the easier it is for you to learn. So, pronunciation is can be important in like language learning goals. So I think I have an advantage there just by the fact that, you know, my grandparents and my mom speaks Italian pretty fluently. So yeah, I don't know if you speak another language, but or try to learn another language, but it's definitely not easy. So learning through these tools is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some people that are listening that don't aren't from Canada, but in Canada, since French and English are both of our national languages, we have to learn English and French. Well, French up to I think grade 9, and then we get to basically decide whether or not. So I studied it up until grade 11, I think. But honestly, I have retained barely anything. Like if I went, I feel like though I would like be relearning it if I went back to if I like went to France and like studied there for a while, like a couple months. I feel like I could pick it up quickly, but I just don't practice it. So it almost like gets lost in your head, like in the depths, and it's like put in like a little box and put in the back of your head. That feels like my French, but other than that, I don't speak any other languages.
No, it's so true. Like, I use my Italian more than I use my French today, like in my
Mm.
everyday life, obviously. But I do have friends that do speak French, and sometimes I try and I realize that I get the languages mixed up, and
Oh,
so because they are kind of similar in some way, and because I was learning them at the same time. So I had both French and Italian in the same semester in both high school and in university, and which made it really good because the structure is quite similar, but it also meant that occasionally I'd be on the exam like, oh, what is that word? And did I write the right word? Or yeah, so I don't know. I just was crazy for wanting to do that, but it definitely can happen where you do get mixed up between the languages if they're similar.
wait. Oh my gosh. So I have never had, or I have had this experience, but no one has ever been able to relate to me because I was the only one that did it in high school. But there was one year in high school where I took English, French, Spanish, and Mandarin. And I had to take all of the finals at the same time at the end of the semester. And I also experienced the same thing where I was like taking exams and I was like, when I was supposed to be taking like a Spanish test, I was thinking in like a completely different language. And I was like, like I can't, my brain was like trying to compute so many different things at once. But I've never met someone else that like experienced the same thing. So I'm really glad that you said that because
No,
I can relate to you.
it's a real experience. And like I say, I have good days, like good language days and bad language days, because language learning is not linear. Okay, so I'm still not at the fluency level that I would want to be in. For example, my reading and writing is much slower than my listening and my speaking now. Speaking is usually like the last to come, people say, but I'm just not reading Italian every day, like a book, for example, because I study in English, and I write like I write like a kid in grade 5. Like it's just not a skill that I'm practicing all the time, aside from like texting maybe. But the truth is, on those bad language days, like I tend to get frustrated with myself and like you start to feel down about your progress. But because it's not linear, you recognize that in the whole scheme of things, like where I started, you know, 5, 6 years ago, I have completely like I can go to the post office by myself and order my lunch and talk to neighbors on the street without having to prepare a sentence or a script. And those are huge milestones that even if you're having a bad language day, I try to remind myself of.
Yeah. It's like a muscle that you have to keep like practicing or keep utilizing, or else like it's just going to be like soft and squishy. So you want to keep strengthening it. That's the way that I see it
Exactly.
too.
Yeah, people say you use it or lose it.
No, totally. I wanted to ask you as well that so during your undergraduate degree, you did a study abroad in Italy. Why did you decide to do that in Trento, Italy, and then also come back? And now you're there now, just in Bologna.
Yeah, so unfortunately, in my second year of university, at the end, COVID happened. So I moved out of Ottawa back to Brantford and did my entire third year online, like many students did across the country, across the world, I should say. And unfortunately, because part of it was my fault, I didn't do the math on my credits. And I also, the courses I needed to take weren't being made available at the time that I needed to take them, that I realized that I couldn't graduate within the 4 years, that I would have to come back for another semester. And I was devastated. I had a plan. I was going to take my LSAT. I was going to go to law school. And this completely threw a wrench in the plan. And anybody who's a type A person, I think can relate to that, like a kind of high achieving person who's like, this is the plan. And I spoke to my Italian professor online and I asked her on a completely unrelated note, like how I could improve speaking. And she said, Donatella, I think you've learned everything you can learn in the classroom. And I think you need to like go study abroad. And I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to do that, And then I realized, I don't have enough credits to graduate. So I might as well go do them in Italy. So I put in my application in October of my fourth year and found it in February. And it was between Rome and Trento, and the school Carleton picked for me. And I was super disappointed to get Trento. I was like, where is this place? My family's from the south. This is really far away. It's in the northern part of Italy, tucked between the Alps. If you go even further, they speak, like the provinces, like the area is called Trentino Alto Adige. And Alto Adige, they speak German. And I had never even met somebody from Trento, like Trentino area. Because most Italians in the diaspora community in Canada are from the south. And so I'm like, I've never even visited here. I don't know anything about these people, or it's a different culture for sure in its own right. And it's beautiful place to study. My mind was completely changed. Like I woke up every morning to the view of the mountains. And because it's a small university town, not a lot of people spoke English, which really forced me to have to practice Italian every day. And essentially that exchange changed my life. I came home and I said, I don't want to be a lawyer and I don't want to go to law school. And I think I'm going to take this opportunity to study abroad some more, because law school will always be there. But this opportunity to enrich, like combine my love of law and languages exists in Bologna. So I came across the master's while I was studying in Trento. And the master's is essentially a master's of law, but it's in English. And I thought, this is perfect. Okay. This is a sign I have to go. So I moved back for a year, and then I moved back to Italy.
So it's so funny when you originally found out that you were doing the study abroad in Trento and you were like, I don't know this place. And then it all basically changed like the entire trajectory of where you saw your life and your career going. But what's actually so funny too is I know someone from Trento. So when you're talking about like,
no way.
Yes. So I swam at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and there was an Italian there. Her name's Francesca, and she's from Trento. And so my friend and I, a couple years back, I think in 2019, before COVID, my friend and I, we spent like 2.5 weeks in Italy. And we started in Trento. So we flew into like Venice area, and then we took a train up to Trento.
That's what I did.
Stayed with our friend, and it was beautiful because it was a small town. Like you see the mountains in the
Yeah.
back. You're like, it's insane. And then we had to like walk up this like little street, and it was like right beside a church. So in the morning, like the bells would ring. It
Hmm.
was just like so like that area is so beautiful. So I'm so
It,
glad that you got to study there.
it is such an underrated area of Italy. It's very famous for its
Totally.
Christmas markets. So if you love Christmas markets, anybody who's listening and want to see a side of Italy that's usually not on your postcard, I rep Trento so hard. Like, I tell people all the time, if you can fit it on your list of places to travel to, it's amazing. But that's so funny that you know someone from Trento, because there are Italians here that have never met somebody from Trento. So
Wait,
it's kind
really?
of, yeah, it's like, you know, it's like, oh, I've never met someone from Trento, or there are Italians who have never been to Trento. So,
Uh,
you know, done more than them in that respect. So that's so cool. Good for her to
yeah.
go to school even in the US. That's not an easy transition. Trust me, I did the reverse. So, I applaud her as well.
I was gonna say, since like you went to Italy almost like having to relearn the whole language, like my friend and also a lot of my other friends who are from different parts of Italy came to like our university not knowing English at all. Like I don't even know how they passed the SAT, like truly. But they basically came, and I remember one story where one of my friends when she like literally came off the plane, and we asked her when she like came to our dorm, we said like, oh, how was your flight? She said yes. Like good, like didn't even understand the question at all. So that gives you like where they really started. And then basically within like I want to say 6 months time, they were all fluent. Like they knew not just like English as a language, but knew all of, like the different types of like slang that we had.
Yeah,
Like it I feel like English is probably one of the most difficult languages to learn, just in terms of like all the different random like cultural things that we do within it. But that could also
for
say
sure.
be said for any other language too.
No, it's I all my friends are bilingual at minimum here, right? Like in Europe, I think, and I've reflected on this a lot. Um, I love what I studied and I still love what I study, but I think had I gone like lived here and grew up in a different area of the world where languages were really encouraged, I think I would have probably studied languages first.
Mm.
Um, and I think because I grew up and people would say, "Wow, that's really great that you're good at French, and like it's really great that you're interested in languages, but what job are you gonna get with that?" You know? And the truth is, you can get a lot of jobs by being bilingual, not just in French, in our case in Canada, but just in any language. And we live in this sort of North American bubble where we don't really think about having to learn another language for employment. But for a lot of people in the world, that's not the case. They have to learn another language to make themselves competitive in the job market. But beyond that, it just enriches your life experience. Like you're able to connect so much more with so many other people. Like I now understand empathetically what it's like to want to say something and express yourself and not be able to find the words. And
Mm.
that's a real experience for people who immigrate all over the world, including to Canada. Like it's a, a very real experience for my grandparents, for my mom too, who, like she moved back and forth between Canada and Italy. And so she was in ESL as a student. So like I have a whole new respect for that experience, at least in my family, but for many other people I come in contact with. And yeah, it's almost like an empathy exercise. So for all my friends who speak English, I'm like, you guys, your English is amazing. Like, and they don't think that it is, but it is amazing. They're studying in it. They understand everything I'm saying, and some of them speak 4 languages, 3 languages. It's incredible.
That's insane. It's so interesting that you bring that up, because I was just recording another podcast with a friend who is currently teaching in Taiwan. And we were having a conversation about our teaching feelings about teaching English abroad, and kind of what that's like. But I would love to hear your thoughts more on the power of language. And I like, kind of posed this question, which is like kind of crazy, but would love to hear, do you think we'd be better off with having our like 100+ different languages and dialects, or just have one language that we all share? And would it be easier for us to communicate?
I think there was a proposal in the I really don't want to say it because I'm not sure what year, but there was a proposal, I think in the 70s to have like one universal language. And I think on paper that is so cool. Like as a linguist lover, that's an incredible idea. But that's exactly what it is an idea because language is so much more than words and sounds. It is a culture. Like I look at Italy as a perfect example. And anybody who knows about these dialectal experiences of Italy, each region, each city, each town has its own traditions and its own identity, really. And they feel very strongly about keeping these dialects and things alive because they are dying, because it's linked to culture. So in that whole grand scheme of the world, like you learn so much about a culture through its languages, through its expressions. Even if you take an expression in English, like it's raining cats and dogs, it's not really translatable in another language. And I think the story behind the expression is that it would rain so much in England that when the cats and like would jump on the roofs of the houses, that it became slippery and the cats would fall off. In a weird way, it's linked to culture. It's linked to, I think of all the expressions we have in Canada that I use sometimes, and people look at me like I'm crazy. You would lose that because they're not familiar with the expression, but you would lose that sort of identity. A lot of expressions we use are linked into hockey culture, I notice. That's just not a lot of analogies we use and things like that. People are just like, okay, I'm a little bit confused at that weird, for example, like calling it a toque as opposed to a hat, right? What's this cultural significance of that, And then there's also accents. You can tell a lot about where a person's from their accent. And we would lose that as well because eventually an accent, I believe, I mean, it's harder to get rid of, but you'd be removing that from a country's history or from a people. What about the songs you sing, lullabies and texts that you read and poems? Like I think languages should be encouraged to be learned, not saying in order to make everyone's life easier, we should just all speak the same one. We should be saying, you took 4 languages in school. That should be encouraged because now you're not fluent, but you're traveling and you come across someone who speaks Mandarin and now, you're able just to have a small conversation. Where are you from? What's your name? I studied this in school, and it creates a human connection that the person is seen in a different way. And like I said, there's that empathy component as well. So I am against it's cool, but I'm against the mono language for the whole world. I mean, technically English is like a lingua franca at this point. Everybody speaks English. But that just means English speakers need to make more of an effort to learn another language itself, I think.
Totally. Your answer was honestly so beautifully said. And it also makes me think about the small Italian that I know. 1, swear words. 2, there was a phrase that we used to say for something. We would say in bocca al lupo. Which,
bocca al lupo, yeah.
Yes, which like my friends would explain, the literal translation is like in the mouth of the wolf. But if you're just like saying it as like a phrase, it's kind of like the raining cats and dogs vibe, but it means good luck. Like if we were trying to like translate it. Yeah. So like, again, to your point, like we would be losing all of that. And I also think too, like piggybacking off of your answer is that you can kind of see all these language and dialects as people. Like they all have their different types of cultures, ways of life, traditions that are connected to it. And that's like us as humans who are all living in like different parts of the world, not just speaking different languages, but consuming different types of media, growing up in completely different environments, whether you're in like the mountains of Trento or in like the city streets of New York. It's all like so vastly different, but that's what makes like humans in the world so amazing, is that we all have these different like cultural perspectives. And I think language is definitely a part of that. So I love that you brought that up.
I think like growing up in Canada where lots of people speak, I know we define bilingualism technically as both French and English, but really if I think of most people in my life in Canada, they speak another language at home that's not French or English. And so they are bilingual in something else in some respect. And it's such a huge part of their cultural identity. I think what's interesting is that you can identify as something and Canadian. and doesn't make you more or less one or the other. Because a language is linked to that, and a culture is linked to that, and that's what's really cool. I think that it also helps in building cultures when diaspora communities pop up in the world. Like language develops, at least in my community, in like where I'm from. My grandparents speak Italian, but sometimes they throw in English. And they make their own words for things. That's come out of a necessity, and it's also come out of a cultural experience that Italians would have no idea what that word is. And English people don't use that word either, but it's what I call Italiese. It's actually like a academic thing, but it's called Italiese, which is English and Italian put together. It's not a real language, but it's come out of immigration, and it's come out of necessity to communicate and to express yourself.
It's almost like, so I'm like half Japanese, half Filipino, but I grew up around a lot of like my Filipino family, like in and around the Toronto area. But I remember like growing up, I don't know a lick of Tagalog, which is like the Filipino language, or one of the Filipino languages. And I just remember like my aunts or my uncles, they would like speak in a little bit of Tagalog, but then like insert a random like English word that they forgot or couldn't remember. And then it was just like this mix of Tagalog and English. So like very similar to what you're talking about too.
And it's funny because someone would be like, what is going on? What is this person saying? But if you're in that experience and it's your family, you know, oh yeah, I understood what you said. Okay, great.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I wanted to go back to now that you're studying law in Bologna, I know that you have this like huge passion for language and linguistics, but also wanted to hear your thoughts on the fact that you are still studying law in Bologna. The fact that it is in English, yes, but like why you decided to still study law.
Yeah, law I would say was my first love, I guess. And really, my main goal is to be a professor. I love teaching. Is really what I enjoy. Like in my year off, I taught almost all year. I taught in high school. I taught in elementary school, and I like in my year off as well. I got my certificate to teach English as a second language. So I really was like, okay, I want to be a professor, and I love teaching, and I love learning about the law. And I think law is in everything that we do, very much like language, you know?
Yes.
Language is in very much everything that we do as a society, and law is no different than that. So when I had this opportunity to kind of go outside the North American bubble or Canadian specific bubble and get a little uncomfortable by studying things that maybe were touched upon in my bachelor's, but I didn't really learn about because it's the European Union, or to get a different perspective altogether, and to be challenged in a different teaching pedagogy. Like in Italy, they do oral exams. So you sit in front of a teacher, and a professor can ask you any question about any topic that we discussed in class, read or taught. And it can be anywhere from 1 question to 3 questions. You can be there for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. And you're asked the question in front of your peers, not like directly in front of them, but they can, they're sitting in the same lecture hall as you, so they can hear it. And this is much different than a Canadian exam where we're sitting at a desk and we're writing. And the truth is I have very strong writing skills, but that oral component of being able to answer on the spot is maybe a skill that's much weaker because it's not exercised as much in school in Canada. So I also kind of had this desire, and sometimes the regret, I'll be honest with you, that I wanted to push myself to do this thing. So, but overall, it's been a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely frightening to do like a verbal exam in front of all of your peers. Like I cannot even imagine, but I almost think too, it is more beneficial to do that than do like a written exam where like everyone is just like looking at their paper. But anyways, speaking of writing, actually, I wanted to talk to you about your Substack, To Whom It May Concern. One, how long have you been writing on Substack or have had this newsletter, and why did you decide to start it?
So I started the newsletter in January, but I'd been on Substack reading as a reader for about 3 years.
Wow.
And so I really love long form content. I just think like in a world where we're so inundated with like things that are quick And they're just less well thought out in general when things are quick, in my opinion. And I felt compelled to document this experience living abroad. Like in my first living abroad experience, I posted a lot for my family on Facebook of all the different experiences I had in the places that I went. But I wanted to continue that, but I thought maybe other people might be interested in sort of these thoughts and observations that you get when you're popped into a different circumstance. So I started writing in January, and I'd been sitting on some of these ideas and thoughts for a while, and finally decided to pull the trigger and say, okay, well, who cares if people judge me or think it's kind of weird or funny? I'm just going to do it because there's a really cool community on Substack. You know about it, where people are really supportive of one another. And I appreciate their vulnerability. And I felt like I wanted to contribute to that myself.
Yeah, I actually work in social media, but we don't really, like a lot of like our client partners, we don't really work with them on Substack because there's not a lot of brands and companies on Substack. It's a lot of personal Substacks. But I will say, out of all like the social media platforms, I have never experienced a community like the Substack community on any social platform, just because it is, and I was explaining this to someone, that people get so vulnerable in their posts. Like I was reading like literally hundreds of Substacks like as of recent.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you, like the stories that people are sharing on there are like so, not like insane is not the word, but it's just like so deep and so deeply personal to them that they're still like, you know what, let me just send this out into the like Substack world and see how it goes. But it's reading all of those stories, and when people get that vulnerable, it creates this like really intense, like beautiful community where everyone is very supportive of one another. So completely agree with that. And I also wanted to ask you too, if you have a vision for the future of your Substack, or you're just right now just like posting out the whim, whatever you want to post about.
I was thinking like, when I first started, I was like, oh, should I keep it more academic focused? Because obviously with my goal of becoming a professor and like working in academia, if that's where I do end up, writing is a daily part of your exercise. However, I think I like the personability of like a personal essay and random thoughts that we have. Like I wrote one about social smoking in Italy. So that's something that I don't know if many people think of, but it's something that popped into my mind over a conversation with friends. And this is usually what happens. My friends say something and I go home and I think about it for a while and it turns into something more. So I think for the future, I would love to like maybe put together travel guides. It's kind of unrelated to the Substack in some way, but
Yeah.
like seeing parts of Italy that people don't usually get to see. And like not the tourist spots, those are great and you should do them. But the part of Italian culture and history and personal lives of people, shop owners, you know, where I get my vegetables from, where I buy my books, especially Bologna, because I don't know very many tourists in North America, at least, that venture to Bologna. And I think it's one of Italy's most underrated cities. And I encourage everyone to come visit. Maybe not actually though, because over tourism is a thing, and that's another Substack potential comment. But anyways,
Exactly.
you get the point. But yeah, maybe putting together some travel guides about how to enjoy Italy in non-traditional ways.
And what's your current favorite Substack?
Oh, I was reading this one. I'm gonna pull it up right now. Actually, I was reading this one, and it's you put me on the spot.
I know, sorry.
No, it's okay. I do enjoy reading some fashion Substacks, which is really quite different from my own personal, I believe it's called the Vine. Okay, I like People's Princess. But and Rent Free, I enjoy as well. But for like fashion related things, Gift of Gabs. She's like a kind of fashion influencer. I think she's based out of like Chicago or something like that. But she puts together really awesome gift guides. Oh, I like that stuff. You have to buy a gift for your friend. You're like, okay, where do I go? what do I buy? What's good at like inspiration? But yeah, I really do enjoy Rent Free and People's Princess.
Perfect. Love. Amazing. Well, thank you, Donatella, for joining the podcast. I so appreciate our conversation. And I will be so frank with you. I had a list of questions that I wanted to ask you, but I basically got through like none of them because our conversation went a completely different route in terms of language. But it honestly was like one of the most amazing conversations that I've had thus far of like interviewing people. So I'm so
That's
glad that it
awesome.
took the direction that it did. But to close, I start and end every single podcast with a quote. Well, I end the podcast with a quote because it's based off of my love for Criminal Minds, where
Okay, there you go.
we,
See, love true crime stuff.
no, I love a true crime. And they start and end each episode with a quote. So the quote that I have for you, which is like pretty fitting to our conversation as well, is when you learn a language, you don't just learn to speak and write a new language. You also learn to be open-minded, liberal, tolerant, kind, and considerate towards all mankind. And that's from Mulad Benzadi.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah,
And it does
beautiful.
support my thesis that the idea of one language is cool, but you would be robbed of all those things that author listed.
Totally. I'm so glad that like that quote resonated with exactly what we talked about. But thank you, Donatella, for joining the podcast. I so appreciate our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.